Welcome back to Chapters of Growth, where we unpack some of the best personal finance wisdom out there. Today, we're diving deep into The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I'm so excited to explore this one with you. It's less about, picking stocks and more about the mental game. The psychology that shapes our financial wins, and let's be honest, sometimes are not so winning moments.
It is fascinating how Housel really reframes our relationship with money. He argues that, it's not just about crunching numbers. It's about understanding the emotions, the biases, and even our personal histories that influence how we think about money and how we handle money. It's a whole different way of looking at things.
Right. And you know me, I love a good story. Housel kicks things off with this great story of Ronald Reed, a janitor, who quietly amassed an $8 million fortune.
Yeah, it's a story that challenges so many assumptions, right? Reed wasn't a Wall Street wizard. He didn't, strike it rich with some risky venture. He simply saved diligently from his modest income and invested consistently in blue chip stocks. Just the power of compounding and long-term thinking playing out over decades.
It's almost like a secret recipe that's hiding in plain sight. No get-rich-quick schemes, just patience and consistency. It makes you think about how we often get caught up in chasing the latest trends or trying to time the market, when maybe the real key is just sticking to the basics.
And what's really intriguing is that Housel connects this idea to how deeply our financial decisions are shaped by our personal experiences. He uses the example of people who buy lottery tickets, even when their finances are already stretched thin.
Yeah, it's easy to judge that, right? To think, why would you spend money on something with such low odds?
But when you consider the context, it becomes a bit more nuanced. Imagine growing up in an environment where financial stability feels out of reach. The lottery for some represents a glimmer of hope, a chance to break free from a cycle of struggle.
It's a powerful reminder that financial behavior isn't always rational. There's an emotional component, a story behind every choice. And understanding that is so crucial both for ourselves and for how we view others' decisions.
Absolutely. It underscores the need for empathy and recognizing that one-size-fits-all financial advice often misses the mark.
Speaking of shifting perspectives, Housel also highlights how quickly financial norms have evolved. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it. Widespread consumer debt retirement as we know it. Those are relatively recent concepts.
It's true. Even student loans and index funds, which feel so commonplace now, they're relatively new additions to the financial landscape. The world our grandparents navigated was vastly different, and this constant evolution makes it even more important to be adaptable and open to new ways of thinking about money.
It's a mind-boggling thought.
Indeed. And in the midst of all this constant change, recognizing the role of luck risk and personal initiative becomes even more critical. And Housel brings this to life with the story of Bill Gates.
Okay, everyone picture this.
Mhm.
Teenage Bill Gates in the 1960s with access to a computer when most universities didn't even have them. That kind of access is almost unimaginable today.
Right. It was an incredible stroke of luck being in the right place at the right time. But it's not just about chance. Gates also had an insatiable curiosity and drive that led him to spend countless hours exploring and mastering this new technology.
It's the perfect illustration of how opportunity meets preparation. Luck played a role, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Gates seized that opportunity and made the most of it. It reminds me of that saying, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity.
Exactly. And this blend of skill, risk, and luck appears in so many success stories. Consider Cornelius Vanderbilt, the tycoon who built his empire on shipping and railroads. He was known for taking bold, calculated risks, many of which paid off handsomely. But it's impossible to separate his success entirely from the historical context and a certain amount of good fortune.
Right, even for someone as shrewd and ambitious as Vanderbilt, there were external factors at play that he couldn't control. It's a reminder that while we should strive to make smart choices, we also have to acknowledge that we can't control every outcome. There's always an element of uncertainty, of being in the right place at the right time.
It's about embracing that uncertainty and recognizing that even the most carefully crafted plans can be disrupted.
I'm curious what's resonating with you most so far. Any particular story or idea that's sparking your thoughts? And for those of you listening, we'd love to know. Would you be interested in deep dives into specific chapters of The Psychology of Money in future episodes? Let us know in the comments.
What's striking me is this idea of long-term thinking. We see it in Ronald Reed's patient investing and Bill Gates' early dedication to computing. And even in the cautionary tales that remind us that quick wins are often fleeting.
Yes, it's such a contrast to the get-rich-quick mentality that's so prevalent today. Housel seems to be making the case that building true wealth, both financially and in life, requires a different mindset, one focused on patience, consistency, and playing the long game.
And speaking of playing the long game, perhaps one of the most captivating examples of this principle is the power of compounding itself.
Okay, so compounding. We hear this term thrown around a lot in personal finance, but I feel like Housel really brings it to life. He uses this fascinating analogy between compounding and the formation of ice ages. It might seem like a strange comparison at first, but stick with me here.
It's a brilliant way to visualize the power of small changes accumulating over time. Housel explains how a slight shift in the Earth's orbital tilt can lead to slightly cooler summers. This seemingly insignificant change allows snow to linger a bit longer each year, eventually transforming into massive glaciers that reshape entire continents.
It's mind-blowing to think about how such a small, gradual change can create such a dramatic impact over time, and Housel connects this to the world of finance, right?
Exactly. Just as that subtle temperature shift can trigger an ice age, consistently saving and investing even small amounts can lead to exponential growth in wealth over the long term. He uses Warren Buffett as a prime example. The vast majority of his wealth was actually accumulated after his 50th birthday.
Wow. This really highlights the importance of time in the market, doesn't it? It makes you wonder if many of us underestimate the power of patience when it comes to investing.
It's a common misconception to think we need to make big, risky bets to build wealth, when in reality, consistent contributions and the magic of compounding can have a far greater impact over time.
It's like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. We can start small, stay consistent, and let time work its magic. But Housel also cautions us that while compounding is vital for building wealth, staying wealthy demands a different set of skills, right? He contrasts the stories of Jesse Livermore and Abraham Jermansky to illustrate this point.
Both Livermore and Jermansky were brilliant investors. They were masters of speculation, riding the waves of market volatility to amass considerable fortunes. However, they both struggled to maintain their wealth over the long term.
Okay, so they were great at making money, but not so great at keeping it. Why is that? What went wrong?
Their stories highlight the importance of managing risk and controlling emotions. Both Livermore and Jermansky were prone to making impulsive decisions and taking excessive risks, which eventually led to their financial ruin.
It's like they mastered one part of the equation, the wealth-building part, but overlooked the equally important skill of preservation. It's a cautionary tale reminding us that even if we're lucky enough to experience those periods of rapid growth, is what we do during the dips and the plateaus that truly determines long-term financial success.
Absolutely. It's not just about timing the market. It's about time in the market and having the discipline to weather the inevitable storms.
This is such a great point to end part one on. Join us for part two, where we delve deeper into the psychology of wealth building with more insights from the psychology of money by Morgan Housel.
You know, building on this idea of preserving wealth, Housel emphasizes the importance of recognizing when you have enough. It's a concept that really resonates deeply with me.
That's interesting. You're saying it's not just about accumulating more and more, but understanding when to shift focus.
Exactly. Housel shares a lot of personal anecdotes about the freedom that comes from having control over your time and options. Being able to pursue passions, spend time with loved ones, contribute to causes you care about, without constantly being limited by financial constraints. You know, that to me is true wealth.
It's a different way of defining success, isn't it? Not just by the numbers in your bank account, but by the richness of your experiences and the impact you have on the world around you.
Precisely. It's about aligning your financial goals with your values and recognizing that sometimes the most valuable assets aren't the ones you can measure in dollars and cents.
It makes you think about how we often prioritize, climbing the corporate ladder or chasing that next promotion without stopping to consider whether those pursuits truly align with what we value most.
It's about asking ourselves, what does enough look like for me? And then having the courage to design a life that reflects that answer.
So how do we reconcile this idea of enough with our natural desire for growth and progress?
I think it's about recognizing that growth can take many forms. It's not just about financial accumulation, it's about personal development, expanding our knowledge and skills, strengthening relationships, and contributing to our communities.
It's a more holistic view of success, isn't it? One that encompasses all aspects of our lives.
And this ties into Housel's discussion of the man in the car paradox, which I find quite insightful. He argues that the allure of status symbols like expensive cars often fails to deliver the respect and admiration people seek.
Oh, this reminds me of that time I worked as a valet. I was surrounded by luxury cars all day long. But what struck me was that the people driving them weren't necessarily happier or more respected. In fact, some seem downright miserable behind the wheel of their fancy cars.
Yeah, it's a fascinating observation. It challenges the assumption that material possessions equate to happiness or fulfillment. We often get caught up in chasing external validation without realizing that true contentment comes from within.
It's easy to get caught in that trap, though, isn't it? We're bombarded with messages equating success with what we own, what we wear, and how we present ourselves to the world.
Absolutely. But Housel reminds us that wealth is often what you don't see. It's the money you've saved, the investments you've made, the financial security you've built over time. It's the freedom to make choices aligned with your values without being constantly constrained by financial limitations.
I love that idea. It's like the foundation of a house. The most important part, but hidden beneath the surface. You might not see it, but it's what holds everything together.
And speaking of building a strong foundation, Housel emphasizes the importance of saving. He even compares building financial wealth to increasing energy wealth through efficiency. Just as we can achieve greater energy abundance by consuming less, we can build greater financial security by saving more.
It's a shift in mindset, isn't it? Instead of constantly searching for new ways to increase our income, we can focus on making the most of what we already have by being mindful of our spending habits.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that small, consistent savings can accumulate over time thanks to the power of compounding we talked about earlier.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of saving. But what about investing? How do we navigate the complexities of the financial markets?
Housel advocates for a balanced approach, one that's grounded in sound principles but also acknowledges the role of human behavior. He suggests aiming for pretty reasonable rather than strictly rational when making financial decisions.
That resonates with me. We can't always be perfectly rational with our money. Sometimes emotions come into play, and that's okay. It's about finding that balance between logic and intuition.
Precisely. Housel uses the example of Harry Markowitz, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who developed modern portfolio theory. Guess what? Even he didn't strictly adhere to his own theory when it came to his personal investments.
That's so human, isn't it? It reminds us that even the brightest minds recognize the limitations of pure rationality when it comes to real-life financial decisions.
It underscores the importance of self-awareness, understanding our own biases, and being open to adjusting our strategies based on our individual circumstances and risk tolerance.
It also reminds us that personal finance is well personal. What works for one person might not work for another, and there's no shame in seeking guidance from a trusted financial advisor who can help us navigate the complexities of the market. Speaking of navigating complexities, Housel has this fascinating chapter on the importance of room for error in financial planning. He highlights the fact that unpredictable events, what he calls tails, often have the biggest impact on our lives.
This is such a crucial point. We often plan for the expected, but life throws us curveballs. A sudden job loss, a medical emergency, an unexpected investment opportunity. These tail events can completely derail our best-laid plans.
So how do we plan for the unpredictable? Feels like a bit of a paradox.
Housel argues that it's not about trying to predict the future with certainty. Instead, it's about building in a cushion, a margin of safety to protect ourselves from those unforeseen circumstances.
It's like having an emergency fund, but for our overall financial plan.
Exactly. Housel uses the example of 9/11 to illustrate this point. No one could have predicted such a catastrophic event, but its ripple effects were felt throughout the economy, highlighting the interconnectedness of our financial systems and the importance of being prepared for the unexpected.
It's a sobering reminder that even in times of prosperity, we need to acknowledge the potential for unforeseen challenges and build in a buffer to protect ourselves. Speaking of the future, Housel also discusses the end of history illusion, which refers to our tendency to underestimate how much our goals and desires will change over time.
Yeah, we tend to assume that our current preferences will remain static, but the reality is that we're constantly evolving, and our financial plans need to be flexible enough to accommodate these changes.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that.
Right.
What I wanted in my 20s is completely different from what I want now. And who knows what I'll want 10 years from now. Life is full of surprises, and our priorities shift along the way.
Exactly. It's like trying to fit into the clothes you wore in high school. You've grown and changed, and your financial plan needs to grow and change with you.
It's about giving ourselves permission to adapt, adjust, and make course corrections as our priorities shift. Now, before we move on, we want to hear from you again. Would you be interested in deep dives into specific chapters of the psychology of money in future episodes? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned for part 3, where we continue our exploration of this fascinating book. Welcome back to part 3 of our deep dive into the psychology of money. I'm really enjoying this conversation and reflecting on how much of personal finance is truly about mindset.
Yeah, it's a point that Housel drives home throughout the book. He argues that our relationship with money is often less about intelligence or financial savvy, and more about our ingrained behaviors, biases, and the stories we tell ourselves.
He uses this great analogy to illustrate this point. He compares financial decisions to a trip to Disneyland.
We all love Disneyland, right? The excitement, the magic, the memories, but let's be honest, it comes at a price.
Literally and figuratively. There's the admission fee, the cost of food and souvenirs, the long lines, the potential for crowds and meltdowns.
Exactly. And just as there's a cost to experiencing the magic of Disneyland, there's a cost to achieving financial success. It might be the volatility of the stock market, the sacrifice of delayed gratification, or the uncertainty that comes with entrepreneurship. There are always trade-offs.
So Housel suggests viewing these costs as fees rather than fines. A fee is something you pay willingly for a service or experience, while a fine is a penalty.
Yeah, it's a subtle shift in perspective, but it reframes how we view financial decisions. When we see costs as fees, we're more likely to accept them as part of the journey, rather than resent them as obstacles.
It's like recognizing that building wealth is a process, and there are steps along the way.
And sometimes those steps involve discomfort, or require us to make choices that aren't always easy or immediately gratifying.
This ties nicely into Housel's exploration of pessimism and its allure, especially when it comes to money. I mean, haven't we all felt tempted to give in to those doom and gloom predictions?
Pessimism often sounds more intelligent, more grounded in reality, but Housel argues that it can blind us to opportunities and prevent us from taking calculated risks.
Yeah, it can be paralyzing, can't it? Like, why even bother saving or investing if the world is going to end anyway?
Housel uses some great historical examples to challenge this negativity bias. Imagine being in Japan in the aftermath of World War II. The country was devastated, the economy shattered. It would have been easy to succumb to pessimism.
But against all odds, Japan experienced an economic miracle. It transformed into a global powerhouse within a few decades.
That remarkable turnaround highlights the danger of extrapolating from current circumstances. It underscores the power of human resilience, ingenuity, and a belief in a brighter future.
It's a reminder that while acknowledging risks is important, fixating on worst-case scenarios can prevent us from seeing possibilities and taking action.
And Housel emphasizes that pessimism can be self-fulfilling. If we believe the economy is doomed, we're less likely to invest, spend, or take risks, which can actually contribute to a downturn.
Well, it's like a negative feedback loop. But what's the antidote to this pessimism? How do we cultivate a more balanced and hopeful outlook?
Housel points to the power of stories. He argues that narratives shape our financial decisions and the economy at large. We all crave stories that help us make sense of the world, connect with others, and understand complex concepts.
Yeah, we're wired for stories. From childhood fairy tales to the narratives we create about our own lives, stories help us make meaning and find our place in the world.
But Housel cautions that we need to be aware of how these narratives, particularly financial narratives, can influence our behavior, especially when they prey on our fears or desires.
He gives this really powerful example of a father who resorted to a dangerous folk remedy because he desperately wanted to believe it could cure his sick son. It's a heartbreaking story, but it illustrates how fear and desperation can make us vulnerable to stories that offer easy answers or false hope.
It highlights the importance of critical thinking, questioning assumptions, and seeking out diverse perspectives. We need to be discerning consumers of information, especially when it comes to financial advice.
And recognize that the stories we tell ourselves about money, success, and our place in the world can have a profound impact on our decisions and outcomes.
It's about understanding that our own view of the world is always incomplete, and there's always more to learn. We need to be open to challenging our own biases and embracing a growth mindset.
Housel uses an interesting analogy to illustrate this. He asks us to imagine an alien observing Earth from space.
The alien sees people going to work factories, producing goods, money changing hands. But it doesn't understand the underlying motivations, beliefs, and cultural norms that drive these behaviors.
It's like observing a complex dance without knowing the music or the steps.
And just as this alien might misinterpret what it sees, we can misinterpret the financial world if we don't consider the human stories behind the numbers.
It's a reminder that data alone can't tell the whole story. We need to consider the context, the motivations, and the emotions that shape financial decisions. And that brings us to a crucial point that Housel makes. We all have an incomplete view of the world, but we form complete narratives to fill in the gaps.
Right, it's natural to seek certainty and create stories that make sense of the complexities around us. But recognizing the limitations of our own perspectives is essential for making sound financial decisions.
It's about acknowledging that we don't have all the answers, being open to new information, and being willing to adjust our course as we learn and grow.
This leads to Housel's final point, the importance of personalized financial advice. He argues that just as medicine has shifted from a one-size-fits-all approach to a more patient-centered model, financial advice should be tailored to individual circumstances, goals, and values.
That makes so much sense. We wouldn't expect the same medical treatment to work for every patient, so why would we expect the same financial advice to work for every person?
Housel uses the story of Clarence Hughes to illustrate the dangers of a standardized approach. Hughes was a patient who underwent a dental procedure without fully understanding the risks involved, ultimately leading to tragic consequences.
It's a sobering reminder that financial decisions, like medical decisions, should be made with informed consent and a deep understanding of the potential consequences.
Just as a doctor needs to understand a patient's medical history, lifestyle, and preferences before recommending a treatment plan, a financial advisor needs to understand a client's financial goals, risk tolerance, and values before offering guidance.
It's about recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to managing money. What works for one person might be disastrous for another.
And that wraps up our deep dive into the psychology of money. It's been a fascinating exploration of the mental and emotional factors that shape our financial lives.
I completely agree. Before we sign off one last time, let us know in the comments if you'd like to deep dive into any specific chapters of the psychology of money in future episodes. We love hearing from you. And in the meantime, we highly recommend checking out the book for yourself. It's a thought-provoking read that challenges assumptions and offers a fresh perspective on personal finance.
It's a book that can change how you think about money wealth and ultimately how you live your life.
Thank you for tuning in to Chapters of Growth. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insightful discussions about personal finance and beyond. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep making those financial goals a reality.